Hi, I'm Stefan Kesting from GrappleArts.com, and today we're going to talk about ear guards for Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Alright, if you do Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, you've probably seen some people out there training with some variation of a piece of headgear. Today we're going to talk about very quickly why they might be wearing it, and whether or not you should be wearing one, when you should be wearing one, and what your options are. So let's start with why. Why would you go through the bother of wearing headgear in Jiu Jitsu? The simple answer is cauliflower ear. If you take a look at some boxers, some wrestlers, rugby players, jiu-jitsu players, you'll see that some of them, especially guys who've been doing it a long time, have got ears that are all mangled. They look like a cauliflower. I've got particularly large ears. I've got a little bit of cauliflowering going on. Maybe it's not easy to see on the camera, but I can sure feel it. They're like hard little lumps. If I had let that cauliflower get worse, my ear would look like a lumpy, cancerous potato. I've got large ears. I can't afford, to be any worse looking than I am. So that's what led me down the trail of looking at headgear, evaluating different kinds of headgear, and eventually making my own headgear, which I sell on Amazon. So I guess that's full disclosure about the topic of headgear. Now, cauliflower ear. Let's say that my ear keeps on getting damaged, whether it gets hit or whether it gets really, really rubbed, like I'm in a tight headlock and I'm squeezing my way out, and the ear really gets mashed. So your ear's got skin, it's got some layers, it's got the cartilage underneath. The cartilage gives it the shape. When the layer of tissue that's over top of the cartilage gets damaged and gets separated from the cartilage loses its blood supply. That blood and liquid fill up in your ear. So if you initially, say you get a really good punch to the ear, or you shoot in on somebody and you really smash them with your ear, then that fluid starts leaking into the space between the skin and the cartilage, and your ear gets all big and puffy. It gets soft, like you can push it and it's like squish, squish, squish. It feels like it's full of a really soft jello or something. If you leave that jello inside the ear for long enough, about a week, then the cartilage underneath starts dying, and that's where the trouble comes in. Because as that cartilage dies, the rest of the ear starts laying down this fibrous, not very well organized growth, and your ear goes from being a perfectly shaped, beautiful ear such as this to like a lumpy, cancerous potato type shape. So some guys think that this looks tough and looks super cool, and if you're one of those guys, you're probably not even watching this video because you're going to be doing everything you can to get those lumpy ears and look tough. And if that's you, cool. But there are some people who can't afford to have their ears all mashed up. If your career depends on your good looks, such as mine. If you're a chick, unless you're in a very, very niche market for boyfriends, you probably don't want to have little lumps on either side of your head. If you've got to appear in front of a judge, if you're a lawyer or you're going to appear for your parole hearings in a couple of years, you don't want to be looking like an absolute thug. There is a stigma against ears like that, except in a small niche and just for guys. Now, like I said, I've got large ears. I can't afford to have these giant lumps on either side of my head. If I had little tiny ears, well, maybe it would give me a certain, cachet of toughness in certain circles. So let's say that you and I have been wrestling, and let's say you caught me in a really bad position, Kezugatami, and I managed to wriggle out and take your back. But I get out and man, are my ears ever sore. They're not yet deformed, they're not yet swollen up, but they're sore. This is when I would put on my headgear for the next training session. Because if they're sore now, they're not going to take that much more damage to get all big and puffy, and then I got to go get them drained or drain them myself, which is always a risk and always a drama and never very pleasant. So if my ears are sore from training, I've got lots of sets of headgear to choose from. I put on the set that best fits the occasion. If my ear swells up, if it's fully swollen, well, then I'm going to get it drained. But after it gets drained and after it gets packed, pushed down, if I still want to train, if it's not too bad, I'm going to put on some headgear, some ear guards, and that'll allow me to train, hopefully without making the swelling and the chance of serious permanent cauliflower, because I should say the cauliflower is pretty much permanent unless you pay a plastic surgeon to go in there and reshape all that fibrous cartilaginous growth inside the lumps. And that's a big deal. Who needs another surgery? I know I've had enough. It costs money, takes time away from training, chance of dying, all that stuff. So generally, stay away from surgery. All right, for jiu-jitsu purposes, you've got two kinds of headgear. You've got the headgear with an exposed hard shell, like all these, and you've got the more softer fabric-covered headgear, such as these three. If you're doing freestyle wrestling, you're wrestling in college, you're wrestling in high school, you're going to be dealing with some form of hard shell headgear. That's partially because of all the clubbing that goes on in wrestling. Basically, they're trying to knock each other out with forearm shots to the head, right? All the snap downs, that's a lot of damage. They're spending a lot of time in front headlocks, that's a lot of damage. And when you think about it, if you're shooting in on somebody, you're hitting them with your ear. So the double leg is really the fine art of slamming your ear into somebody hard enough to take them down. You can even tell which side a wrestler shoots. If this ear is totally screwed up and this ear is pretty good, he probably shoots with his right side forward. If his left ear is the one that's all damaged, he probably shoots with his left side forward because that ear is making contact first. So if you're wrestling, you're probably got to wear the hard shell headgear. That's all specified by the wrestling rules, what you can wear, what you can't wear. I'm not an expert in it. Today we're talking about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. For Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I generally recommend the softer, lighter, less bulky, and easier to adjust fabric-covered headgear. These have just got usually two straps, front and back, that you can adjust one time to fit your head, and then one strap to go around the bottom of your chin here. Some of them have got an extra pad here for comfort, some of them don't. Some of them have got shells that are a little bit small, frankly, for most North Americans. I think it's partially because they're all made in China, and Chinese people tend to have smaller ears than Cro-Magnon North American looking guys like me. There are holes in the ear for ventilation and for sound. And although these don't give maximum protection, they're pretty darn good, especially if you're not getting clubbed in the ear, if you're not shooting repeatedly on an opponent with your ear, trying to knock them over with your ear like you do in wrestling. Most of the time, the soft shell ear guards will be enough. Now, if my ear was really inflamed, like I'd just had it swell up, I'd just gone to the doctor to get it drained with a hypodermic, it's all packed in there with gauze to keep it down, and I still want to train, in that case, I would probably go for one of the hard shell ear guards here, which have got a larger area. They're more bulky, they stick out further. It's harder to slip out of stuff because there's an actual ridge on your head here that can get caught. But these really give the maximum protection. So if you want the maximum protection, I would go with a hard shell ear guard. If you want something to protect you most of the time, if your ears are a little bit sore, if you really have to protect your looks, I would recommend one of these soft shell fabric covered ear guards. Most of the time, it's going to be enough. Finally, some people are worried about showing up at class, wearing one of these things, and being thought of as a bit of a dork. Don't even worry about it. So many guys are doing it now. And besides, you look a bit like a wrestler. Who's more hardcore than a wrestler? Nobody. So you can surf a little bit off the mystique of being a wrestler. You can protect your beautiful ears for your ear modeling career. And you can avoid all those pesky trips to the doctor or the plastic surgeon to get your ears drained and reconstructed. That's why I carry a set with me. I don't wear them all the time, but if my ears start to hurt, or if I'm going against the guy who really likes that front headlock or the Kesugatami, I'll put them on just to protect these appendages that stick out from my head and are so vulnerable to getting totally deformed.